Welcome to the Adulting Project podcast. As usual, this episode may contain strong language and adult themes throughout, so please do not listen when young ears around.
Welcome to the Adulting Project podcast, where each week we will take you on a crazy ride. Our aim is to make you laugh, have fun, and occasionally, God forbid, learn something. So strap in, hold tight, as the wild ride of the Adulting Project is about to begin.
Hello.
Good
Hello.
evening.
How are you?
How are you all?
We're good. How are you?
Oh, I can't complain, and nobody would care if I did.
You're preaching to the choir there.
Yeah.
So whereabouts are you at the moment?
I'm in Kansas City, Missouri.
Oh wow, nice
Nice
weather.
and sunny there.
Yeah, it's a little chilly, but it's a good day, and they'll be jumping out of planes here later today.
So you
What would you call a little bit chilly over there?
30s, 40s.
What's that in English money?
A lot of warmer than we've got.
Oh right. I just walked to my little garage studio and got absolutely pissed on. That was
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah, it's raining
Yeah.
here as well.
I don't miss London winters.
I
No,
don't
neither
know
do-
anyone that does.
Neither do we. We get them every year.
Yeah.
Can we swap?
You know, I'd love to go back and spend some extended time, but summer is much better than winter.
Oh yeah. Even summer's not that great.
Yeah, no.
No,
No,
it's
we
not. But I mean, shoot, you get like 17 hours of sunlight.
Yeah.
Yeah, that might also include about 15 hours of rain.
Well, it may, but I remember, you know, when I was a student at Oxford, that Michaelmas term, that winter, we had 8 straight weeks where there was no sun.
Wow.
Marking every day, and it's like did not see the sun one time.
I bet that can get a little bit depressing, that.
Yeah, it was a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, need my vitamin D or the
Yeah.
studio light that's currently blinding me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You do look a little bit pasty there, young man.
Oh, I feel it. So thank you very much for joining us today. We finally got here.
Yeah. No, that's quite all right.
Fantastic. Could you give our listeners a bit of brief, just tell them a bit about yourself, the people that may not know who you are.
Sure. My doctorate's in sociology and psychology. I've studied people for 30 years. I've also lived with multiple sclerosis for about that long as well, although it wasn't correctly diagnosed until about 2006. And you know, I have a company, wrote a book, do lots of stuff to help support people who are living with chronic health conditions to live a better life, and to help their loved ones and caregivers not only support them better, but maintain their own lives as well. And I do a lot of training for medical health wellness professionals so that they can deal with us, because most of them are trained according to an acute care model.
Right.
You find the problem, you fix it, and you send it back to a normal life. Well, more and more often, you know, like in the United States, over half of us now have at least one chronic illness.
Wow.
And in Britain, you're right about there with us statistically. And we're not going to get better. This is something we have to navigate for the rest of our lives. So being a medical professional, treating people who are never going to get better, it can get kind of depressing.
Yeah.
And burnout is a huge problem in all those professions. So I do a lot of training to help them deal with that as well. And then, of course, a couple of years ago, I had given up on too many dreams in my life, and one of them was becoming a legit skydiver. And so I, even though my legs are wonky and they're hard for me to control, and all those other things that come with MS, I decided somehow I was going to figure out a way to come back and get licensed and be a serious skydiver, because I'd started the training back in the 90s when I was in grad school, and one thing after another got in the way, and so education and family and health, and so I wanted to get back. So in 2019 I did, and normally it takes you 25 jumps to get your A license in skydiving.
Yeah.
It took me 47 to figure out my legs and some of the other stuff that's going on. And then once that happened, I kind of hit the gas, and so I logged another 100 jumps or so that year. And then in 2020, I said, I'm going to be a really serious skydiver. So 500 jumps is kind of a dividing line in skydiving.
Yeah.
Once you get 500 jumps, you can get all of your licenses, you can get professional ratings, and you're no longer kind of considered a novice at that point.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get to that point. And that meant in 2020, I would have to log better than 1 jump a day for the entire year to get there. So I set myself that goal, and I logged 370 jumps in 2020 and made my goals. So, and now I'm at 600 and counting. But that was a way of me kind of, I don't know, giving the finger or 2 fingers to MS.
I love to fly. I really do love to fly, but I've got no desire to throw myself out of a perfectly good airplane.
There are no perfectly good airplanes, right?
I've done it once, and it was into the Strait of Gibraltar. We went up in the back of a Herc, and they went, out you go. And I went, okay. They went, you see that knife? I went, yeah. He went, when you hit the water, make sure you cut yourself out if you can't get out, because otherwise it'll drag you down. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it was like my training in the 90s, because tandem skydives weren't a thing back then, and so we did IED jumps. So we did all the training, went up in a little Cessna, and it's like, okay, it's your turn. So climb out on and grab onto the strut and stand on the wheel there. And my instructor looks at me like, you ready? I'm like, yeah. He grabs my pilot chute and throws it out into the relative wind, and it yanks me off the plane. And it's like, okay, you're committed now. You got to figure this out.
You didn't have a choice when he said you're ready. You was going.
No, I did
going. Yeah. Is it something you'd recommend to everybody?
No, it's something I would recommend if you think you would like to do it.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that you probably have a relatively good gut feeling about whether it's something for you or not. And so if it's something that you would consider, do it.
I have thought about it. I've got a mate that was in the army, and he did some jumping with the army. He did some parachuting with the army, and I did think about doing it. He did talk to me because he did it in Civvy Street as well, but it was just one of those things I never got around to.
Yeah, and it's it's either it's going to like really fire your imagination or it isn't. And for me, from the time I was a little kid in the 70s, and I first saw a skydiver in person flying what at the time were the brand new Ram Air parachutes, the squares that we call them. And you can fly those like a fixed wing glider. So I was just completely enamored of it. So I would after I did that, after I saw that, I would build my makeshift parachutes and climb up as high as I thought I could survive and jump off. And I bent myself pretty good a few times, but didn't totally break myself. So it was something that I always wanted to do.
Fantastic. You said earlier on about you MS. I mean,
Mhm.
I don't know a great deal about MS. I must admit, I don't know exactly what the disease or whatever it is. Could you explain that, especially to me?
Yeah, probably no
What is it?
reason you should know anything about it. It's one of those that it's got a familiar name, so
Mm,
everybody kind of recognizes it, but no one really knows what it is. And
mm.
and truthfully, until after I was diagnosed, I mean, maybe in the last 10 or 15 years, we finally got an understanding that it is an autoimmune condition.
Right.
So what happens is if you have MS, like any autoimmune condition, your immune system gets a little crazy and starts attacking some part of your body. With MS, my immune system is attacking my central nervous system.
Right.
So it's eating away the myelin, which is like this fatty layer that surrounds our neurons in our brains and our spinal cord. So
Wow.
the joy of MS is that it's a snowflake disease. That's what they call it, because for everybody it's different.
Right.
It depends on which part of your brain and spinal cord have been attacked. So everything we think, feel, do, say, all of that passes through our CNS. And so if my MS attacks the nerves that are sending signals to my legs,
Hmm.
then I have problems walking. Or in my case, it's more often I can't feel. Like I normally can't feel below my knees.
Wow.
And but it's also cognitive and emotional and all those things. So I had a massive right frontal temporal exacerbation a few years back. And your right frontal temporal region goes out, and that's higher level cognition, it's emotional regulation, it's all those things. So it is quirky. It changes all the time. It is it can be completely devastating.
Yeah.
And it's just living with a condition that you're never going to get away from. You're never going to win. So you have to pick your battles and figure out a way to build a good life, even though
Yeah.
you've got something that really sucks trapped in your carcass with you.
Exactly. And you were saying you got misdiagnosed. So until
Mhm.
2006, was that correct? Correct?
In 2006, I finally got the right diagnosis. I first had, retrospectively, I first had symptoms in 1989. I was 20 years old, and
Wow.
I was in college, and my balance started going a little wonky, and I started itching everywhere, and I was a little cognitively foggy and confused, and uh, some random pains, things like that. But I got really depressed over it as well, because I didn't know what the heck was going on, and everything was suddenly weird. And so I went to the physician, and he probably looked at yet another college student with squishy symptoms coming in and picked up on the, oh, I'm feeling bad part of it, and said, oh, you're depressed, and
Oh,
sent me to a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist confirmed, yes, you're depressed, and put me on some meds. And I took them, and they didn't work, and I tried another, and they didn't work, and I tried another, and they didn't work. And I got the uh, tag, oh, it's treatment resistant depression. Okay. So yeah, that's part of it. There's other stuff going on.
yeah.
So, I was, and then kind of the symptoms went away, because that's what happens with relapsing remitting MS. They kind of come and go for a long time.
Oh, okay.
So I didn't think a whole lot about it. I thought, okay, I've been through that. I was depressed. I was, depression runs in my family.
Yeah.
So do autoimmune conditions, but we didn't understand that back then. So I just went on with my life, and I had these weird little episodes every
Mm.
once in a while that would kind of turn my life upside down. And finally, one morning in 2002, I woke up and I couldn't feel my left leg below my knee.
Oh, wow. That must have been a
And
bit of
and
a shock.
Well, it was weird, and of course, I'm in my 30s, and I'm still a young man, and you know how we are when we're young. It's we're invincible.
Yeah.
So I didn't really think about it a whole lot. I thought maybe I'd pinched a nerve
Yeah.
lifting weights the day before or something like that, and then a few days later it was back, and it's no big deal. And then it started coming and going, and then other body parts would disappear, and then one day I woke up and I could feel my right arm and my head, but the rest of my body was gone.
Oh shit.
Yeah. And at that point, my then wife said, "Okay, I'm putting my foot down. You're going to go get this looked at."
Yeah.
So I did. And then there was like a comedy of medical errors for a few months, and I ended up getting diagnosed.
And they finally got it.
They finally did, although not before my neurologist had confidently pronounced to me, "You will be so glad that it is not multiple sclerosis."
Fuck's sake.
Wow. and then we got some more tests, and I was sitting there in his office for a follow-up visit, and he walks in, pleasantries, big thick paper file, tells you how long ago it was, and he was flipping through it, and he stopped cold, and he did this wild-eyed double take at my file. Now I can tell you, you never want your neurologist to do a wild-eyed double take at your file. So he said, "Excuse me, I've got to check something." And he rushed out of the room, and he came back about 5 minutes later, and he sat down in front of me, and he kind of slumped in front of me, and he started, "I'm so sorry." Now, again, you never don't want your neurologist to start out like that either. He said,
No,
"Yeah,
that must bring some really bad thoughts in.
Yeah, it was, it was like, holy cow, what's going on, man? This is going to be awful. And he said after we had done some additional tests with what was then a new MRI in the area that had better resolution, he said, "Yeah, the results are clear. It's MS, and it's been in your system for years."
Right.
So,
and what can they do once you got the diagnosis? Was there a treatment plan, or was that what you started researching?
Now, there is. I mean, there's obviously there's no cure.
Yeah.
There are two different kinds of medical treatments that go along with MS. One is what's called a DMD, or disease modifying drug.
Okay.
And that means we take it, and statistically it helps us hedge our bets. So in other words, if we take that med, it's not going to affect the way we feel or the way we operate, but over the long term, we're likely to have a better prognosis with fewer exacerbations and less degeneration. So at that time, the only DMDs were injectable.
Right.
So I had to inject myself multiple times every week with that.
Oh.
Yeah. And it became really tough after a while. That is not easy to do.
No.
And then the other things, sometimes they'll give you medication for specific symptoms. So for pain, or for fatigue, or concentration, things like that. But what I found was that those medicines only do so much. And we are not just bodies that need medical treatment. We're a complex system. We're bodies with brains and minds and behaviors and environments and relationships, and we need kind of a whole life approach to improve our quality of life, and find things that are still worthwhile, even when it's kind of stressful to look at a future where today is probably the best day you're ever going to have.
Right.
Yeah, because sitting there and taking your meds and not having anything to look forward to can be a real downer, and I should imagine it can make you very, very depressed.
Yeah, and I did. I went through a phase when I had that exacerbation, took out my frontal lobe. Now I'm I'm kind of a brain guy. I mean, that's how I make my living, and that's what I've done, in the world. And so, on the one hand, the physical challenges of MS are stressful, but for me, when I was having serious cognitive symptoms, that was really terrifying.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I got really depressed. And my wife and my kids, at the time, they were doing everything they thought they could for me, but they eventually gave up on me.
Oh, wow.
And that was really crushing.
Mm.
So,
And
sorry, carry on.
go ahead. No, I was
Carry
going to say, and then right after that, you can see there's my Akita that's kind of
Japanese
wandering back
Akita,
and
yeah.
forth.
Yeah.
I've had Akitas for 30 years.
They're beautiful
And,
dogs.
aren't they though?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're
And
absolutely stunning.
amazingly loyal.
Very loyal. I had one.
Oh, did you? Good
Yeah.
for you. Good choice. So anyway, all this had happened, and the last person to leave was my son, and he was a teenager at the time. And about 3 weeks after he completely moved out, my dog died
Oh, shit.
from bloat. Yeah. So that was like the last thing I was hanging on to in the world. And I completely hit bottom. I couldn't see a way to a future that I was interested in living, So I thought, either I'm just going to end it all here, or I'm going to give myself one more chance.
Yeah.
And I decided I was going to give myself one more chance. And my one more chance was, I had given up on becoming a skydiver, and I'd done it. It was a few years before I'd ended up having having a relapse while I was mowing the lawn. I ended up paralyzed in the front lawn, staring up at a bright blue sky. And I kind of wryly thought at the time, wow, it looks like a beautiful day to skydive. And I was thinking, here I am paralyzed on the ground. I'm never going to get back up in the sky again. And I gave up on that.
Wow.
So after all this happened, I said, I need a win. I need to do something big that will surprise myself, that will demonstrate that I've got some capacity that I thought I'd lost. And so I said, I'm going to go back and become a skydiver. And so I did in 2019. And that gave me the resolve to finish the research that I'd been working on for the last decade, and get the book ready and get the classes ready and launch the company and all that other stuff. So
Yeah.
it was, an important thing for me. It seems like a really frivolous thing to throw yourself out of a plane repeatedly, but I don't know of anything more life affirming than skydiving.
And fall into your death.
No.
Then catching yourself in the last minute.
Yeah, because what it is, every time I leave a plane, I think 82 seconds. Because from 14,000 feet, my life expectancy is 82 seconds unless I do something right.
That's amazing.
And so every time, somewhere around 20 to 22 seconds left to live, I make an affirmative decision. I choose to live.
Yeah.
And I deploy my parachute, and that is, and I save myself. I save myself every time. And that is an enormous confidence for somebody who had been at a point where he didn't feel like he could trust anything about his body and his brain, to walk through the rest of the world with the confidence that, yes, I can do this and I can save myself every time. That was huge.
It's fascinating. It is fascinating. We briefly touched on previously, you're an entrepreneur, you got your own business. What is your business? What would you do?
Yeah, it's called Your Life Lived Well. It's the same title as the book.
There it is.
And everything. Yeah. Isn't that a great and that, that picture on the cover of my book,
yeah,
it took us 8 jumps over 6 weeks to get that picture, because I had a a very specific image in my mind that I wanted.
Yeah.
So I wanted the clouds and the sun on the horizon behind me and that look. And I'm doing this gesture. You can see where I've got my hands up to my forehead like this. That's a universal skydiving gesture. And I
Right.
explain it in the prologue of the book. That's called the wave off.
Right.
So at the end of free fall, we track away, get some separation from one another, and we give the wave off. And that's a signal that's telling everybody else in our airspace, I am now about to take affirmative action to save myself.
Oh,
Be
that's
warned.
fantastic.
Yeah.
And so I wanted that image on the cover of the book because that's what people are doing when they pick the book up.
Yeah.
They're saying, I'm going to take action to save myself.
That's fantastic.
So, yeah, so we deliver seminars and webinars and lots of stuff. You know, I spent 15 years as a professor, and so I do the whole teaching thing.
Yeah.
I spent like 6,000 or 7,000 hours in front of classrooms over the years.
Wow.
So
that's another one of my nightmares. Hate them.
It's not for everybody. Yeah, it's not for everybody, but I feel at home there, and so we do that, and so we train people who live with chronic illness. We train people who are loved ones and caregivers, and we spend a lot of time training those medical health and wellness professionals. And the book's coming out on February 7th, and about a year from now, we should be launching the app, the mobile app that helps. See, it turns out that most of our challenges when we live with chronic distress, pain, and illness amount to behavior and mindset change. We've got to adapt in different ways to accommodate what it is that's going on with us. And it turns out, if you look at the research, there are about 150 ways to change a behavior. And all of them work for someone, but only some of them will work for you.
Yeah.
And right now, people are stuck kind of trial and erroring their way through figuring out how to do these changes. And that's really discouraging, and people give up. So what I've done is I spent the last decade doing the research to figure out, well, how do you profile someone to say, okay, for a person like you in your circumstances, what is the most likely thing that will help you change for the better for you?
Yeah.
So the algorithms match you and then monitor you as you're going through and say, oh, okay, you're making the right kind of progress. If you're not, switch you to the next most likely thing.
Okay, yeah. So what sort of advice would you give to a carer and a sufferer?
The first is communicate, and it's really easy to get locked into our old habits with the way we communicate. But what we have to understand is that with any long-term human relationship, so if it's somebody you've known for a long time, whether it's like a partner or a friend or like a child, you change over time, they change over time, the environment changes over the time. So we have to continually renegotiate what our relationship is going to look like. And with the chronic illness, suddenly you get this big monkey wrench thrown in there, and you have to accommodate it, and your carers have to accommodate it as well. So you've got to be honest, and a lot of times we'll not talk to each other because we're afraid of hurting one another's feelings, or it's kind of a dark topic that we don't feel comfortable broaching. Well, put on your big girl panties and get over it. Have the conversation.
I find that simple statement of having a conversation and being open with the people around you and telling the world of what you need it solves so many problems that
It does.
it's amazing how people don't do this more often. Like, if you're depressed, go talk to someone. If you feel in pain, go talk to someone. If you want something to change in general, talk to someone, because we're not all psychic. Apparently some people are.
No, and that's a really excellent point, because we've got all this advice out there. We always hear, be empathetic, take the role of the other, put yourself in another person's place. And that's good. We should try to do that.
Yeah.
But here's what the research says about that. The research says that the best of us suck at doing that. Okay. So if longtime partner, you've lived with this person for a long time, and you are asked, well, why did they just do what they did? Make that attribution. Best case, we are correct about half the time.
Wow.
So what that means is, we not only need to perspective take, we need to perspective give.
100%. Yeah.
You need to actively say, no, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm seeing. It may not be right, from some kind of external objective circumstance, but that doesn't matter. Everybody needs to know where you're coming from.
Yep.
Yeah. And then you can all meet in the middle and be honest with each other.
Yeah.
It's a bit like when you ask the wife what she wants for dinner and you never get a straight answer. Just tell me, just what you want.
Oh, don't get me started.
Yeah. Yeah. I always used to get whatever you want off my ex-wife, and it was like, well, I want this. No, well, you're not having it.
When my first wife and I, after we divorced, we and all my wives have been redheads, by the way.
Good choice.
Yeah, well, an exciting choice. So after we had divorced, I lived in the same community and she had moved to another place, and so I was going out. I was headed to go out to dinner with my then wife, my second wife, and I could not remember where I wanted to eat, where I liked to eat. I could remember what I liked eating, and it turns out this is something called shared remembering, and there's good social psychological research on that.
All right.
We separate our memories, the burden of carrying our memories, among the people we tend to share those experiences with.
All right.
Yeah, so you'll remember part of it, they'll remember part of it. Well, she remembered where we like to eat. I remembered what we like to eat. So I can remember getting we're headed to go out to eat, and I don't know where to go out to eat. So I call her up and I say, hey, where did we like to go out to eat with this? Fortunately, we were in good terms, and she told me. So, but yeah, we've got to renegotiate these things.
That's crazy. What's the other crazy things that you've found out through your research about just humans in general and their psychology? It's always fascinated me, psychology.
Oh, it is.
I mean, we've got a person that's quite well known in the sort of same-ish segment called Darren Brown. I suppose you've heard of him. Mm-hmm. And every time I listen to him, I've read his audio, listened to his audio books, read his books. You've seen him live, haven't you, Scott?
Yeah, absolutely fascinating guy. Absolutely mind blowing.
Is that the sort of same steps that he goes along when he's trying to figure someone out and trying to modify their behavior? Would that be the same sort of research that you do?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'll tell you. Okay, so here's one thing that people don't understand about ourselves, and if we did, and this is actually chapter 2 in this book. We all carry around this identity, and our identity is essentially the story we tell ourselves about ourselves.
Yeah.
And we're always working on that story, and we're always trying to fit our experience into that story. Now, on the one hand, yeah, we each have a real identity, and that's part of us. But on the other hand, the identity is kind of a lie. that our mind tells us to help keep everything running on the right rails. Okay, so underneath the hood, it's better to think of ourselves as a society of mind. So we are this unruly community of lots of different facets in our personality, and each one has different drives. And this is, by the way, why we have emotions. Emotions are motivators. They move us to go toward things or away from other things. And they're our second oldest form of motivators. Our oldest are somatic. They're pleasure and pain, right? Yeah. And then we've got another layer that's even newer than both of these, and that's our cognition, kind of our what we think of as our rational thought.
Okay.
And so all of them, everything, all that they're doing is they're just trying to move us toward things that they think are going to be good or beneficial in some way and away from others. But the problem is our little cave, and I think of them as cave children, they don't agree, because they're all very limited little brain systems that make very limited judgments about the world and see it only in a particular way. So from this perspective, yeah, it's really good that I eat that extra donut, because this is from a part of our life that is saying, oh, we need more calories because who knows, things may be scarce. And then we got another one there that's saying, oh, it's immediate pleasure, right?
Yeah.
And the more we live in a world where we are closer to the edge, where we are more stressed, and not stressed in a good way. There's eustress, good stress, and distress, bad stress. And so the more we are experiencing bad stress, the more these primal cave children voices will be running the show. And your identity there is trying to negotiate, a truce and figure one way forward for you, because you've only got one body and you can only do one thing, and everybody's trying to pull you in different directions. So if people would understand that really what you're doing at every moment is sort of the uneasy consensus results of your internal committee, that would provide a lot more enlightenment, I think, for people to understand themselves. And it's a doorway to becoming more kind to ourselves as well. Because you realize some of these parts of ourselves that are needing satisfaction are not necessarily our favorite parts or the parts that we want to own up to having, but we're still just uppity naked apes. And we need to do this. We need to satisfy those parts of ourselves as well.
Yeah, 100%. I think coming around to the unfortunate situation we all find ourselves in, this COVID situation, do you find the psychology, the mentality of the whole society has taken a battering? Have you seen any difference between the start of the lockdowns to whatever weird situation we are? We're in a lockdown, we're not in a lockdown, no one really knows what we're doing. But have you seen a big difference?
I think that it's a big difference for some of us, and it's less of a difference for others. And it really depends on your individual psychology, and it depends on your local makeup, and it depends on the social network of people that you're hanging out with all the time, and reinforcing how you're seeing the world and that sort of thing. But there's no doubt that humans don't deal well with uncertainty.
No.
And there's a lot of uncertainty right now, and there's a lot of risk. And what happens with uncertainty is, on the one hand, you're triggering that fight or flight response, okay? Because And it's not really fight or flight. There's really like 8 or 9 of them. It's like freeze, flight, fight, fawn, fright, faint. You know, there's a whole bunch of them. And I like to call it the F it response, because there are a whole bunch of F's, and we're going to choose amongst those. But that's a really short-sighted perspective as well. This F it response, it shuts down part of our higher cognition and our ability to kind of see the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And because it's all about saving us right here, right now. And unfortunately, that's really good if you're trying to save yourself from a saber-toothed tiger on the savannah. But if you've got this amorphous virus headed around in the society, that doesn't necessarily point to the best strategies.
Yeah.
So because we don't see it like that, because we kind of don't understand it like that, and because that part of our brain gets engaged, it becomes really distressing, and we feel really uncertain, and it's hard for us to make plans, and it's hard for us to see. And one of the things that comes out of that is what we call in the research learned helplessness.
All right.
Okay. So humans have to have a sense of agency. We have to have a feeling that we can change our own worlds in ways that we desire.
Yeah.
And if we don't feel that way, then, well, what's the point, right? And we can just sort of give up on life. And so that way is kind of one of the paths into addiction. It's one of the paths into kind of becoming lost in digital culture. It's one of these paths to becoming disinterested and disengaged from the people around you and your life. And if we're all locked down, then we don't have the kind of normal social environmental reinforcement that we're used to and we've built our lives around.
Yeah.
So it's distressing.
Do you think the lockdown has caused a lot of people to lose touch with normal face-to-face communication, and now only want to communicate via the internet or via their mobile phone?
We've certainly seen. I think what's happened with the lockdown is effectively COVID has, on a lot of fronts, like personally, but also like in labor markets and things like that, it's kind of accelerated some trends that we've already seen maybe about a decade or so. So if we wouldn't have had that, we'd still be kind of headed in the same directions that we've been seeing. But I think it probably would have taken us 10 or 15 years to get there. And now, it's because part of us is, okay, so I like to think of us as resource misers, but that's really just a polite intellectual BS way of saying we're lazy. Okay.
We are.
So, and we are. We want to conserve our resources. And on the one hand, that's pretty good. But now we've got these patently easier ways to do things like communicate with one another. Now, on the one hand, that makes something like this possible. And that's really cool, because I like sitting down and chatting from people, thousands of miles away from me. That's really neat.
Yeah.
And but if instead of getting out of my house and going down to the local to have a conversation face to face with my friends, then I just get them on Zoom instead, or I text them, or I do something like that.
Yeah.
Then fundamentally we know that is not fulfilling all of the human needs that human communication needs to fulfill for us.
100%. So I want to spend a bit of time on your book. I know we've got a finite time with you, and I want to make sure we get this point sorted. Let's start with the bog basic. Who would you say your book is aimed at?
It's for those whose lives have been touched by chronic illness. So
Right.
whether you are diagnosed yourself, or somebody close to you is diagnosed, or you're a professional and you have to deal with us day in and day out.
Fantastic.
So those are kind of the groups, and there are a lot of overlapping concerns, and I address them each, as we go through in the book.
Your book, is it aimed at one specific illness, or is it everything?
No. Yeah, and that's the difference in the approach that I've taken. So I'm a social and behavioral scientist to begin with. I'm not a medical professional. The experience of living with a condition that is not going to get better. And so, when I started, like over a decade ago, when I started digging into the research after I was diagnosed and need to find some answers for myself, it's not a matter of being healthy or unhealthy. It's a matter of having a good quality of life or not. And so there's so many wonderful books out there on strategies and tactics for specific illnesses. And those are great. And I think everybody should dig into those. But what I was interested in was contributing to a conversation I didn't think we were having enough of. And that was just, if you've got something in your life you have to live with that is not going to get better and is probably going to get worse, well, you've still got a life to live.
Yeah.
And what are you going to do with that? Because I have seen so many people shut down and turn in on themselves and divorce themselves from the world. And I did that for a while. And, even knowing what I know, I did that for a while. So I completely empathize. I understand. But I was interested in speaking to kind of the level of lived experience, and how do we improve lives when we're not going to have all the resources, and we're not going to have all good things all the time, and we're not going to have people around us all the time who are saying, oh yes sir, exactly, this is the way whatever you think is correct. We've got to live with bad stuff.
Yeah. What
do we do?
Totally. What would you say was the hardest part about the book to write?
Wow, that's a good question. It's hard. It was hard in two ways. So I actually wrote this manuscript once, and it was really dry, very academic, and it was, the science was good, but I understood that there was something missing there, and I set it out to some advanced readers, and they're like, yeah, it's really good, but nobody's going to engage with this. I have got to tell my own story. And so part of it, my own personal story got really dark. And there was part of me that I am willing to be open and honest about the stuff that I was willing to be open and honest about. And so I had to come to the point where I could become the man that would share all of the story.
Right.
And wrap the science in lived experience. Because if it's just the science, it's too easy for the book to come off as talking at you or down to you as a scientist. And what I wanted people to understand is, no, I lived this, and I so understand the challenges that you are facing, and I've been there, and I'm still there. And it's not like I just solved my life and now it's beautiful and cool, and I'm just flying through the air and flying with birds. I had an eagle fly along with me once. I got it on video. It's really cool.
Wow.
You can see it on my social media. But I do have those experiences, but I also have rough experiences where, yeah, my legs still don't work sometimes.
Yeah.
And I still feel depressed sometimes. And I'm still going through those. So it's, in the book, I say in the introduction, this is not a problem with one solution. It is an ongoing challenge that you will have to adapt to. And the book is not providing, it's not about, here's the one way that you can save yourself. Because, to my mind, if somebody comes along and says, oh, here's the secret, or here's the path, or here's the whatever it is, that's a load of BS. They're lying to you, or they are deluded, one of the two.
Yeah.
But what I can do is I can help you figure out how to find your own path. I can say, here are the things that you need to be looking for in your life.
Yeah.
And here are the options. And now you go figure it out yourself, but I'm going to make it easier, and I'm going to show you how to construct your own path.
That's so refreshing, because 9 times out of 10, all the books that we see out there, and everybody, there's always someone telling you what path to take. It's never anyone showing you the array of paths that there actually is. It's normally, this is my solution, this is the way you're going to do it, and it's no other option. So it's proper refreshing the way you're just taking a hand and going, tell me which way you want to go.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, and that was really important to me, because I talk about this in the introduction a little bit. I have always thought that most self-help efforts are fluffy, smarmy bullshit.
Yeah.
And so I was really surprised when I got to the point in my life where I felt compelled to write a book that could be classified in that genre, because my answers are not your answers, and it's not somebody else's answers. My answers now aren't even the answers that worked for me 5 years ago, or will work for me, next year. The thing that is valuable is helping people understand, here's how you can see yourself and the world in a way that will allow you to make efficient, effective decisions for your own path.
Yeah.
So the book helps you find your own path and guide you down it. And it's a continuation. You're always going to have to adapt to the path. Have you got any plans on writing a follow-up book?
Well, once you read this, you'll see there's like a ton of material that I've only dipped into. In the substantive chapters, I've only taken like the 3 or 4 major things that you need to know in order to get yourself off to a good start. So there's tons of other material, and I do use some of that in some of the classes. And when I wrote this manuscript, I tend to overwrite. I mean, as you might have guessed, I'm never at a loss for words. And so when I first wrote this manuscript, I wrote about a 900-page manuscript, and what's in it is a little over 400. So there's a lot. There's a lot more stuff, and if this finds its audience, then
Sure, it will.
I've got lots of follow-ons.
It's a book I might look into myself. I live with a heart condition, so it's a book I might look into myself.
Yeah. Fantastic. I'm very conscious of time. What I want to make sure is people know where to find you. Obviously, we're going to put all your links in the description below, but where would you want them mainly to go to find you?
I've tried to make yourlifelivedwell.co as kind of a clearinghouse for it, so they can find all of our social media there, and those are always your LL Well on all the major platforms. And there's links to the podcast, which is an informative podcast. And I'd love people to check that out. There's links there for upcoming seminars and webinars and all that kind of stuff. And you can download a free 100-page preview of the book right now. So
I'll talk to you about that afterwards because the British version didn't work. We tried downloading it the other day and it wouldn't let us because of geo-lock.
oh my, no, yeah, I'll get that straightened out. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting me know.
No
Just-
worries.
Plug your book again. What's the title? And where can they
Your
buy
Life
it?
Lived Well. And the subtitle is The Science of Crafting a Good Life Under Chronic Distress, Pain, and Illness.
You know, we've
And
written
where-
that down so we can buy it, yeah?
Yeah. Where can they buy it?
You'll be able to get it, I hope, everywhere. We're working on deals for various things. I mean, obviously Amazon, but and if you sign up there at yourlifelivedwell.co, then you'll get all the latest information about all the possibilities for getting it. And it'll be out, in hardcover, softcover, ebook, audiobook. I'm recording the audiobook right now.
Oh, amazing.
So
It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. I've learned so much in a short space of time, and there's so much more that we can cover. It's up to you. We'd love to have you back on at some point.
I'd love to, and I've been delighted talking with you, gentlemen, and I thank you for the conversation.
Oh, anytime. We love to
more than
listen.
Well, you guys have a great day.
You too.
And you.
I hope I can get a couple things done and still get in the air.
You sure can. And I'll speak to you soon, dear sir.
Yeah, have a good
All
jump.
right. Be well, everyone.
You too.
Cheers. Thank you. Bye.
Hey guys, it's Jamie from the Adulting Project podcast. We would just like to say thank you very much for listening. But we need you to do one thing. Can you guys take a second to stop and go and subscribe, follow, do all the good stuff? I'll tell you what, I'll wait here for a couple of seconds while you go and do it. Go on, go do it now. Well, I hope you have. We don't want you to miss the future episodes. So once again, thanks for listening. Doodles!